Hey,
Hello, how are you?
good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for jumping on here early. I was having some issues. It said that the meeting got ended by the host, and I was like, how can that be? I'm the host.
Oh, maybe like I jumped in and then I left for a second. So maybe that, but yeah, I had I was having internet issues at 5:30. I was on a call with Jan and the rest of the team, and it was like I got cut off the call. And then I got a text message from Spectrum that was like internet service is down in your area for the next
Oh
2 hours.
no.
So I picked up and I'm at my in-laws right now.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm all good now, like I'm all set up, but yeah, it was
Did you
definitely
lose your second monitor?
yeah, so now I just have one monitor.
So Shayna is, I see, joining right now. We can do it two ways. We can, instead of having you share yourself, we could have Shayna. So what happens with the slides is they all get put into a master deck. And Shayna typically shares that deck. I am trying to, what my preference would be is for the deck to get shared from the one person, and then there's something where you can remotely control the slides. So Shayna would give you permission and you could click next, next, next.
Okay.
So that I think is the smoothest way. And since you don't have the second monitor, I know it can get tricky. You can try it, test it out now. Now is the time to test. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the roll call now. San Mateo County.
Dave Pine.
San Mateo County. Atherton.
Rick DeGolia.
Belmont. Brisbane. Burlingame.
Donna Colson.
Colma.
Cade Gonzalez.
Daly City.
Radas Nagwal.
East Palo Alto. Foster City.
Sam Hindi.
Half Moon Bay.
RV Rarback.
Hillsborough.
We have Leslie Ragsdale for Christine Krolik, and Larry May is also on, and but his video's off.
Okay. I don't believe, Leslie, that we can count you as part of the roll call just yet. I think we have
Correct.
to have official appointments made, and
Yeah.
Larry is officially off the council, right? Just for clarification. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Los Banos. Menlo Park.
Betsy Nash.
Millbrae. Pacifica. Portola Valley.
Jeff Alfs.
Redwood City.
Elmer Martinez here in place of Giselle Hale.
San Bruno.
Marty Medina.
San Carlos. San Mateo. South San Francisco.
James Coleman.
Woodside. Director Emeritus.
John Keener.
And Director Emeritus. I don't believe Pradeep is here. Okay, let me double check 'cause this is close.
Yeah, you got 12.
Perfect. Wonderful. We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody to our unusual December meeting, not on the normal third Thursday. But here we are. And if there are any public comments, please click the reactions button on the bottom of the screen and raise your hand. Tom Cabot.
Hello, this is Tom Cabot. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up as to some unusually high prices in the gas wholesale market that will be flowing through to customers suddenly as very large gas bills in the coming weeks. California is kind of separated from the rest of the country in its gas markets in a way where they shot up to over $5.50 per therm just for the commodity, and then we add on the $1.4 per therm delivery charge, making gas rates up to $6 and $7 yesterday and the day before. They're down a little below that today, but cumulatively, those high wholesale prices tend to be just rolled through to customers on a monthly basis by the gas utilities. So the customers will be seeing some very high gas bills. There probably are a couple things that can be done with that information. One is to try to warn customers of that, because if they put on a sweater now, they can save a lot of dollars later. But if they don't put on the sweater now, they can't. And then the other thing is it'll probably make electrification higher in their priority set after they've seen those shocking gas bills. And then your staff can probably tell you how those high gas rates roll through into the power markets and affect the unhedged portion of your power portfolio that you have to buy. So it has a kind of a trickle down effect into a little bit of impact on electric in your unhedged portion. Anyway, I just thought I'd alert you to very high wholesale gas prices leading to high gas bills, maybe 3 times as high as they were last year. And that'll be a surprise.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I don't see any public comment. If I could get a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent items, that would be great. And we all know Rick Bonilla won't be making that motion. Marty made that motion.
So
Can we get a
moved.
second? Harvey gave a second. Thank you. Could we please do a roll call?
San Mateo County,
Yes, Dave Pine.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont, Brisbane, Burlingame,
Donna Colson. Or yes, sorry.
Houma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
yes,
Hillsborough, Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica, Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos, San Mateo, South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. Thank you, and I believe the motion passes. Let me double check. Yes, the motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the chair report. I've got a couple things to report. As we discussed when everyone was waiting for the meeting to start, we've had a big change on our board, which we're going to address when we get into the agenda, where we recognize the departing board members is item number 8. I just want to thank everyone. That loss of board members also means a loss of members to our executive committee. So we've had 3 members of the executive committee who are no longer on the executive committee because they're no longer on the board, which reduces the actual members present for the executive committee to 6. And since we're a committee of 9, we require 5 of those members to show up for there to be a quorum. So Donna and I have talked, and we're interested in filling on an interim position those open seats. We have appointed Carlos to one of those seats. So Carlos is now on the executive committee, but that leaves 2 open seats. And if anyone is interested in joining the executive committee, this is until March when the board elects a new executive committee, but the chair and vice chair are enabled to make an interim appointment. So there are 2 positions open, and if anyone is interested, please send me an email or a text and let me know. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because I just came out of a 3.5-hour council meeting dealing with the housing element, and I had about 5 minutes between the two. But I can't think of anything else I need to report on at the moment. If I come up with something, I may bring it up in between action items on the agenda. But I'll move off this item, and the next item on the agenda is the chair report.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for helping us make quorum. We have some very important items that we're discussing tonight, so we appreciate you being here. Next slide, please. So first, for some staffing updates, we wanted to welcome a couple of new hires. Brooke Morales started on November 21st as our Senior Marketing Communications Specialist, and Justin Pine started on November 28th as our Strategic Accounts Manager. I think Justin is here tonight. Can wave. Anyway, we're very happy to have them join our team. Excellent hires, and as you know, we have an awesome team here at Peninsula Clean Energy, and Brooke and Justin further add to that awesomeness. Next slide, please. We have some open positions. So we have 2 positions currently posted on the PCE website. One is the Director of Power Resources, and we are in the process of doing interviews for our finalist candidates for that position and hope to have that position filled in the next few weeks. We also have posted a position for an IT Systems and Support Administrator. So you can take a look at that and see if you know of anyone who might be a great candidate. And then we will also be posting 3 more positions over the next week. One is for a Senior Power Contracts Manager. Sadly, Chelsea Keys, who is our Senior Power Contracts Manager and is currently our interim Power Resources Director, will be leaving us as of the end of this month. So we need to find someone as awesome as Chelsea to fill that role, which will, of course, be difficult. But we wish Chelsea well in her new venture, and who knows, she may be trying to sell power to us. The next position is our Director of Marketing and Community Relations, KJ Janowski, who has been in this position for the last few years, has decided to retire. So she is going to be leaving us at the end of February, and we are about ready to post that position. And again, if you know anyone great for that position, big shoes to fill to follow KJ. KJ again has been a great member of our team and has really upped the level of the marketing and outreach and all of the work that our team does. So we will certainly miss KJ. And then the last position that we will soon be posting is an administrative assistant. We have so much going on. Nellie is going in 1,000 directions all the time, and we need someone to help Nellie. And particularly as we go back to in-person board meetings starting in March, there's a lot of coordinating to get those going and to make those go smoothly, keep the systems running properly. Anyway, we've got plenty of work for this person to do. Just as the overall organization grows, there's just more and more work to do. And we are a very fast-moving organization, and a lot of stuff needs to get done in a short period of time, all the time. Next slide, please. On the regulatory side, you're going to be hearing about some of these items tonight. PG&E's new generation and PCIA rates are expected to be published on December 30th, and Leslie will be filling you in on that under item 9 tonight. And the NEM 3.0 decision was passed by the PUC late this afternoon after hearing 6 hours of public comments. And Jeremy will provide more details in item 11 about what the new NEM 3.0 decision is. Next slide, please. On the Sacramento front, Mark filled you in a bit last month on what we expected to have happen. That as scheduled on December 5th, the legislature met, swore in their new members, and they ratified the agreement in the assembly whereby the current speaker, Anthony Rendon, will remain the speaker until June 30th of 23. And then Assembly Member Robert Rivas will assume the speakership on July 1st. There were some very close races that ended up with very close margins. Palm Springs Assembly race saw a vote difference of about 100 votes in favor of the Republican Greg Wallace, and Democrat Christy Holstage has conceded that seat. And then a Fresno Senate race ended up with fewer than 20 votes separating the candidates. Democrat Melissa Hurtado has been sworn into the seat, but the Republican candidate David Shepard has requested a recount, so that is still possibly up in the air. Whatever the outcome is, Democrats still have a supermajority in both the Senate and the Assembly. Governor Newsom made public some of the specifics he would be asking the legislature to address in the special session on oil company profits. A bill introduced by Nancy Skinner, SB 2, asks the legislature to consider empowering state agencies to review gas costs, profits, and that's gasoline costs, profits, and pricing, and also seeks to provide the state with greater regulatory oversight of the refining, distribution, and retailing segments of the gasoline market in California, as gas prices here were much higher than they were in the rest of the country. The proposal also seeks to discourage oil refiners from earning excess profit margins by authorizing the California Energy Commission to impose a civil penalty, and the amount of the maximum margin and the amount of the penalty will be determined through the legislative process. The proposal funnels any penalties collected to a price gouging penalty fund and then given back to Californians. So we expect that also committee assignments will be settled by the time the legislature reconvenes on January 4th for both the regular session and the special session. Next slide, please. You might note in the procurement report, which was item 17 in the packet that you received from us, that we have signed, or we will be signing, a 3-year agreement for wind energy from the Cal Wind Resource One project, starting on January 1st, 2023. This project is a small 8.7 megawatt wind project in the Tehachapi area. The procurement authority that you have given me allows me to go ahead and sign this because it's a project for less than 5 years, provided the chair of the board, Rick, and our general counsel, David, agree to the terms of that agreement, which I believe they will. And anyway, we'll start getting, because that project is starting really soon on January 1st, we're excited to have some more wind energy coming to us. Next item, next slide, please. Last month, I talked to you about the Solar Plus Storage on Public Buildings program. We are still finalizing the review of the customer power purchase agreement with the jurisdictions that are in our first cohort of 15 projects. And as we noted, we're looking for additional projects for our next cohort. We are hoping to be able to get those projects lined up and get the interconnection applications into PG&E before April 15th, so that those projects can be under the NEM 2.0 rules as opposed to the new rules that were passed today. There's a 120-day grace period, as it were, for new projects to still stay under NEM 2.0. So Peter Levitt and Carlos Moreno on our staff are busily talking to jurisdictions and other public agencies that are interested. In this case, what we do is we install the solar system, PCE will own it. There's no upfront cost to the agency, and then we will sell essentially the electricity from that solar system to you at a price that's even less than the price that you're paying PCE now. So it's a good deal, and we hope to get more of these local systems installed. Next slide, please. As we have turnover on our board, we're looking for additional board members who might be interested in serving on our ad hoc legislative subcommittee and our ad hoc marketing subcommittee. So again, if you have interest in either of those areas, please let Nellie know. And then lastly, last slide, our next set of meetings, next time we'll get together will be next year. Executive Committee, January 9th, CAC on the 12th, Board of Directors back on our fourth Thursday of the month schedule on January 26th, and then the Audit and Finance Committee will be meeting in February. So happy to answer any questions that any of you might have. Okay, thank you.
I don't see any questions. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the report from the Citizens Advisory Committee. I think Cheryl is going to give that.
Yes. Good evening, Chair DeGolia and honorable members of the board. The CAC met Thursday, December 1st, and was eager to hear a high-level overview of the new Inflation Reduction Act by CFO Christina Cordero. She explained how new funding opportunities like renewable generation, tax cuts, and building decarbonization incentives may support PCE's priorities. Members had questions about the process and timeline for distribution of the funding, but both are still to be determined. Vanessa Shin, Community Relations Specialist, reviewed PCE's achievements to date and for the year. It was a really impressive report. CAC members will be proud to share in our discussions with our networks that since 2016, you've saved customers $90 million and reduced electricity production emissions by 98%. We'll brag that just this year, you rolled out service in Los Banos, developed brilliant modeling for 24/7, 100% renewable energy delivery, and adopted a DEAI plan. You've given us mounds of good news to share with our networks. Committee members discussed their 2022 work as community liaisons, including which promotional messages they shared, which media they used, what worked and what didn't. Some members are interested in a social media tutorial so they can expand their participation. Kirsten Andrew Schwinn, Senior Manager of Community Relations, told the group that they'd soon receive a member satisfaction survey and asked them to get it in by December 15th, today. One of our working groups is discerning how best to use the CAC's talent and expertise, so we're eager to hear from members. That completes my report. What questions do you have for me?
Okay, are there any questions for the CAC? There's a question from Donna.
Thank you, Chair DeGolia. I am curious from the CAC and just in general, do we have any openings on that, or are we full up on the CAC? Is it fully volunteered?
That is a good question. We've had turnover too. I might defer to Kirsten if she's on to know.
Yeah, our CC is currently full.
Okay.
That said, things always seem to happen. And so we have yet to pool the members to see about their plans in the coming year, especially as we come back to in-person meetings for the change in the Brown Act in March that may affect some people's ability to participate. So I anticipate that we will probably need to fill some openings that we don't know about yet.
Okay, that's great. I just wanted to know where we were on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten, for answering that for me.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions or comments from anyone on the board? And let me just see if there's any public comment. I don't see any. So we are moving to item number 8, which is recognition for departing board members. And we've got, actually, I had counted that we had 7 departing board members, but in fact, when you count people that have been on the board at one point in the past and may have just been an alternate board member, we have 9 departing board members. So I am going to go through this one at a time. And Jan has a plaque to share with you online, although the real plaques have been sent to everyone's home. And the first departing board member, but certainly not the least on my list, is Rick Bonilla, who, as we all know, has been on this board since the very beginning of the board being created, and his involvement in launching and building the community support for PCE occurred well more than a year before we became a board. So Rick, there's nobody we're going to miss more.
And Rick, let's see if I can hand you the plaque and you can receive it there on the other side of the Zoom.
Hold on, I have to grab it to do that.
There we go. Okay. The magic of technology.
Recently, okay. you wanna
Okay,
hand
here
it
we
to-
go. Here goes Rick. Yay!
There it is. And I am very proud of this. Thank all of you. I am very proud of this. I have to say that Peninsula Clean Energy, aside from serving on the council, as I have for the last 8 years, Peninsula Clean Energy has been the most fulfilling undertaking by far, above anything else that I've worked on. It's been the most meaningful. We have done such great things. And it's been like anything else, not always, smooth. It's like an airplane. Once in a while, you hit some rough air. But we've gotten through things. And in all, I have to say, I'm extremely proud of Peninsula Clean Energy. Jan, you have had a steady hand on the helm. And the board has been great to work with. I'm so proud of the work that we have all been able to do together. And it just, I don't know where I go from here after this, but people keep asking me, what are you going to do now? And what I tell them is that, I did decide I could have run. I have another 2 terms left, but I'm older than I've ever been before. And I've got some other things I want to do. So I decided to step down, but I'm not stepping away. I'm going to continue to work on housing, transportation, climate, and equity. These are important things all over the world, extremely important right here. And so, though I won't be a member of the board, I will still be around, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the future to continue our work.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rick. We can't say it that enough. And I know Dave has a comment.
Right. So Rick, I can remember well talking to you in the very first seconds of the discussion about Peninsula Clean Energy. I remember particularly that we heard about a person in Marin named Sean Marshall, and I said, like, how do I get in touch with her? And I think you had already called her. So you were there from the very beginning. I'll always fondly remember our work in those very early days with the founding group to make this happen. And you've been so impressive as a board member. Your passion for clean energy and combating climate change is second to none. Not only on PCE have you been a leader, but you've been a leader in your own city and really set the standard for cities across the county and in fact across the nation. So, and finally, to acknowledge you've been a champion of labor, and largely because of your efforts and with Corporation for Many, we've really established PCE as a leader in the working collaboratively with the labor community, and we really hats off to you for that work. So Rick, I'm sure we'll be talking lots, and you'll still be involved in the good fight to save the planet. So thank you very much, Rick. Thank you very much, Dave. And let me just cap on a little bit to the labor thing. I'm very proud of the work. Our policy number 10, the work we've done is very meaningful. People that work for a living quite often don't find an entity like PCE that actually supports them in this way. It's very meaningful. Thank you all very much.
Can I add a word as well?
Muted, sorry, Jan.
That's
And anyone
okay.
else who has a comment, please raise your hand.
Yes. Rick, it has been a great pleasure to get to know you over the last 6 years. And you have really pushed us on the labor side. And I've learned so much that I didn't know before I came here about labor. So thank you so much for pushing PCE, and we've been able to push other CCAs as well to being more cognizant of labor issues, especially at the CC Power. So really appreciate that. And it's just been fun getting to know you as a person too. And it's sad that we haven't been able to be live for the last 2.5 years, but appreciated the time we had before as well. So hope we continue to see you here. You know where we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I look back fondly on those days when we were traveling to Los Banos to talk with people out there in Merced County at the groundbreaking for the Wright Solar Facility. These were all great times. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman,
And-
if I may, if that's all
Yeah,
right.
go, Sean.
I just want to say, Rick, it's just been a delight to know you. And I first of all want to say thanks for placing that call back in the spring of 2014, or maybe it was 15. And I also want to say thank you for the work that you've done around the country. I don't know how much the board knows that you've represented PCE before legislatures in Colorado. I believe you've presented in New York and other places that are trying to bring CCA to their state in a manner that really emulates what we're doing in California, and in particular Peninsula Clean Energy. So I just want to thank you for your extra credit and extra work that you did on our behalf. And I'll miss working with you, but look forward to keeping in touch.
Yes, we can keep in touch. And by the way, I can't take credit for New York, but I did enjoy Colorado. That was great.
Thank you. Maybe
You
it was
could probably
Arizona.
take credit for your New York, Rick.
Okay.
Okay, so the next person on my list is Larry May. And
I'm here.
yeah, he's here, and Jan has a plaque for you.
Jan, don't try to hand it to me. I'm out of the state of California and for some reason didn't pack the plaque in my suitcase.
Okay. Well, Larry, you were an invaluable member of the board. We're going to really miss you. You've really been important. You've been here for so long. And I know the finance committee is going to miss you, but for the whole board, you've been a very, very valuable member. I'm glad that I've gotten to know you as well as I have since you've been on the board.
Appreciate that, Rick. It's the other Rick is a real hard act to follow in terms of contribution to PCE. But for me, I'm ending not only a 12-year term on the city council, but before that, I did 12 years on the school board. And the school board was a transformative period for Hillsborough, so that was pretty exciting. And PCE clearly rivals that in terms of the thrill of being part of an institution that's doing massive change. And I'll always be grateful for being part of PCE, the original board, and the last 6 years. It's been great. So I appreciate it.
And thank you, Larry. Your contributions on the Audit and Finance Committee have been great, and you've been serving as the chair this last year. And also way back when, I think when we were trying to figure out where we were going to move to and getting our lease together, your expertise in land and leases and your attorney background was very helpful to us to make sure that we were walking down the right path. So we really appreciate that. We're really going to miss you.
And I'm glad the board will be moving back in March and use the real estate.
It's a beautiful facility. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, the next person on my list is Joe Goethals. Joe was I think you were a primary board member when we started, right? You were one of the original primaries.
Rick and I wrestled for it every year, and
Ah.
Rick won most of the time.
So,
sadly,
and you've
but,
been an alternate for a long time.
I have, and Rick doesn't miss a meeting, and you all know that. And I will let you know right now, Rick's coming, and he's talking during public comment, so you're not going to miss him very much.
We know that. So thank you so much, Joe. You've been a really important part of this organization. It's hard to see people that have been as involved as all three of you leave. It's this year's a real loss for us.
This is what I am most proud of, and I am proud of all of you. This is one of those things that we did unanimously as a community. I have to acknowledge Dave Pine and Carol Groom, the efforts that they did to make this happen. There's nothing else that I'm more proud of. And to serve with a colleague like Rick, who continues to inspire me about our efforts to solve our issues with the environment. I thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I appreciate it, and I will continue to watch the great work that you do. I cannot thank you enough.
Great. Okay, thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Did you get your plaque? I'll hand you the plaque.
I put it on my wall at work. It's
already there.
I'm very
Okay.
proud of it.
Yeah, it was great getting to know you, Joe. We didn't work together too much, but back in the day when we met in person and we used to have our in-person city meetings, it was always a pleasure to meet with the San Mateo contingent. So best of luck to you. Thank you for all your help.
And the next person on my list is Ken Gonzalez, who is here on behalf, he's here as a board member, but we are recognizing Ray, who was on our board this past year and passed away during the year. And we terribly miss her, but we are glad, Ken, for you to be on the board. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
There you go.
The host had to release me there.
Okay.
Well, thank you on behalf of myself and my daughter who's here.
Hey.
And our rest of our family. And I know Ray enjoyed being on the with you guys and just kind of trying to fill in her footsteps but thank you for all your condolences and everything else and all you've done for Ray in the past and we'll see it. My daughter would like to. She didn't pass to me yet. Sorry, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. So
thank you, Ken. It was always a pleasure working with Ray. She always had a smile on her face, and she represented the city well. So we appreciated her involvement, and we're looking forward to getting you more involved with PCE as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
So the other board members I don't see on my participants list. But I can easily have missed someone, so I will read off each name, and if any of you are here, please let us know. My list includes, these are departing board members: Giselle Hale, Laura Palmer Lohan, Carol Groom, Tom Faria, and Charles Stone. This is just a huge change for us to see this many board members leave. Every year we've had 1 or 2 board members leave, but this is really an impactful year. So I hope that everyone who is on the board, and as your jurisdictions appoint new people, for those of you that are standing in, that people step up for the subcommittees, because the real work of this board occurs on the subcommittees. And you really get to know the issues on the subcommittees. That just think about the work that the DAI group did, just incredibly important work for us. And the executive committee goes through all of the big agenda items before they come up. So you really learn the business by being on the subcommittee. So I encourage everyone to look at those subcommittees and consider joining one of them. And that will end item number 8.
I can't mute.
Which brings us to approval of new PCE rates effective February 1st, 2023.
Thank you. And Leslie will
Hello.
be making this presentation.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide. So I want to start off here with some, what I'm calling our guiding principles for the 2023 rate making. We are approaching the rate making this year a little bit differently, and I'm going to go into the details of that through the presentation, but I wanted to start off with what are our guiding principles that we set for ourselves when looking at this and evaluating and coming up with the recommendation that we did. And to start off, we want to continue to maintain 2 rate schedules for PCE customers. Right now, we have a rate schedule for Los Banos customers and a rate schedule for San Mateo County customers. And that's to ensure that customers in each one of those territories have a 5% discount from the PG&E generation rate. We want to continue that philosophy, but we're going to group the customers a little bit differently. And so we want to group them by vintage, and we'll explain why later. But one rate for vintage 2016 and 2021 customers, and one rate for vintage 2022 customers. And the vintage that we're talking about here is the vintage customers are assigned when they depart service. It's the vintages that are most prevalent within our various service territories. Second point here, this is going to be surprising for those of you who haven't been keeping up with the exciting PCIA conversation. We're looking to have some negative PCIA this year mixed in for the first time. And so with that negative PCIA comes a benefit for customers, because that negative PCIA will be realized as a credit that PG&E is going to issue on their side of the bill. We want to make sure the customers who are eligible for that negative PCIA and those credits get to keep that credit as we approach the rate making. And then above all, we want to make sure that all of our customers are getting a minimum net 5% discount on that generation rate. With some of these different factors that are going to come into play here, we're actually going to have some customers getting a larger than 5% discount. With what we're seeing right now, which is not the final data, but what we're seeing right now with the most recent updates, the way we approach rates are going to allow for the San Mateo County customers, those vintage 2016 customers, to have a 5% discount if that PCIA stays positive for them. They might have a slightly more than 5% discount if the 2016 PCIA ends up being negative in the final rates. The Los Banos customers with the vintage 2021 would have a greater than 5% discount. And that's the majority of our customers in Los Banos. Those are the customers that we enrolled in April, and the net metering customers that enrolled before the end of June. We do have some Los Banos customers with the vintage 2022, and those are the folks that were enrolled after July 1. We still want to make sure that those customers have a 5% discount, and making the rates this way that we're proposing is going to allow for all that. So we'll walk through the details and how we got here. Next slide. So just to review, our standard rate making process to get to our 5% discount, and this is the process we've been using for the last several years, is we start with the PG&E bundled generation rate. We take 95% of that, and that becomes our baseline. And then we subtract the PCIA charge and the franchise fee surcharge that PG&E assesses on their side of the bill, so that when it comes together, customers are going to get a net 5% discount. So our generation rate that we end up charging is lowered to factor in the fact that there's going to be surcharges on PG&E side of the bill for customers taking service from Peninsula Clean Energy. Let's go to the next slide, please. And we wanted to maintain this when we talk about enrolling new customers. We did the Los Banos enrollment, wanting to maintain that value proposition to new customers. So historically, for San Mateo County, we used the 2016 vintage for all of those customers and that rate setting, because that's the vintage that applies to 98% of the customers in San Mateo County. For the Los Banos customers, they had started enrollment in the spring of 2022, which is still technically the 2021 vintage year for PCIA purposes. So most of those customers are assigned a 2021 vintage because that's when they departed service from PG&E. That's when they left the PG&E's bundled service. Some of those NEM customers, like I mentioned, because we're doing a rolling NEM enrollment based on when a customer's true-up happens. Some of the NEM customers in Los Banos are assigned a 2022 vintage because they joined Peninsula Clean Energy after July 1. About 1,000 customers when we finish enrolling this month. And for Los Banos, we use the 2021 PCIA and franchise fee to calculate a rate for that territory to ensure that those customers had a 5% discount from the PG&E generation rate, so that in the end, the customers from San Mateo County and Los Banos, when you add the respective surcharges together, the net cost to both customers was going to be the same. That's how we approach rate making historically. And then going forward, we anticipated we were going to need to maintain those two different rate schedules for each territory to ensure that customers, would get equivalent discounts. Go to the next slide. Now, when we started to see some of the filings come through for the 2023 rate change, this is the PG&E rate change that's going to go effective January 1. And the first update that we got in October, the 2023 era, which is the the main sort of rate update that PG&E does, they had negative PCIA for all vintages except for the most current present vintage year, which is 2022. And that was very shocking to everybody. And we, kind of had to consider that. And well, what does it mean if we have negative PCIA? What do we, how do we approach rate making to make sure that, we're still giving customers a benefit and they can realize those credits. And, while we're still thinking through, how to approach that, we get another update, the annual electric true-up in November 15th, and that had things change, quite a bit, where the 2016 vintage is now projected to be positive. Very, very small positive. It's almost zero, but it's still positive. And the 2021 vintage is negative. And the 2022 vintage is positive. And so these are the three vintages that are most prevalent for our customers. And so it was creating a bit of a conundrum for us to consider them and how are we going to make sure everyone's going to get at least a 5% discount and, address this, while also trying to make sure that customers who are going to get credits from PG&E get to keep those credits. We also know that these rates are going to change. Again, these are not final numbers. This is a snapshot of just the residential PCIA from these two different updates. And they're going to change again when the final advice letter gets filed at the end of the month, which is December 30th. That's going to have all the rates updated. In that update, the vintage 2016 may end up being negative. It's very, very close to zero here. So any small shift, could push it negative. We think it's probably going to be positive. That's the indicators that we're getting from our consultants, that any more changes are going to happen in the more current vintages, not really in this vintage here, but it could technically be negative. So with that in mind, we had to think about, well, what if we're going to do rate making with negative PCIA? What does that look like? And if we can go to the next slide, kind of want to walk through what we're thinking about is for a modified rate calculation if we're rate making with a negative PCIA. So if the PCIA is negative, we're proposing that we eliminate factoring in that PCIA into the Peninsula Clean Energy rate making. We just eliminate it because our standard process, if you remember, is we take the PG&E bundled generation rate, we subtract the PCIA, subtract the franchise fee, because those are things that are showing up on PG&E side of the bill, and then the end result would be Peninsula Clean Energy's rate. Well, if the PCIA is negative, when you subtract a negative, it becomes positive. We would have to add, to our rate, we'd have to essentially raise the rate that we're charging customers to balance out the fact that they're getting a credit on PG&E side of the bill if we want to keep it at a flat 5% discount. And we didn't want to do that. If customers are going to get a credit from PG&E, we want them to keep that credit. And so we're proposing that if we're rate making with a negative PCIA, that we just ignore that PCIA and we just look at the positive charges that are come on PG&E side of the bill. So it would be the 95% of the PG&E bundled rate, subtract the franchise fee, and then that net result would be our rate. And overall, what ends up happening is that the customer is going to have a little bit more than 5% discount because you have to factor in that they're going to be getting a credit from PG&E. I'm going to walk through an example of this at the end, but just keep this in mind, because if we end up with, you know, a negative 2016 and a negative 2021 vintage, this is what we're going to look at as one of our options for calculating rates. If we still have a positive PCIA for 2016, we don't need to do this math here. But if 2016 is negative, then we would look at utilizing this calculation. Go for the next slide, please. So when we're thinking about rate making with both positive and negative, you know, PCIAs, you know, like I said, wanting to balance all of those factors and still keep those sort of guiding principles that we started with in mind, you know, had to think about what do we actually know about what's going to happen. We know that rates are going to change again before December 30th, but we definitely know that the 2021 vintage is going to be negative. We don't know how negative. We know for sure the 2022 vintage is going to be positive. It's going to change a little bit from that November 15 report, but it's going to be positive. And the San Mateo one is going to be very, very close to zero. It might be on either side of zero, but it's going to be almost zero. And so what we need is the flexibility to use either of our standard rate making model or a modified rate making process based on what we see when the rates actually get published right before they go live on January 1, so that we can do our work over the next couple of weeks after that to get the rates updated, submitted to Calpine, and get them live and ready to go so that the new rates can be implemented by no later than February 1st. You can go to the next slide. So I wanted to just review here before I go into a rate calculation. This is the the PCIA table that was in the current November 15th annual electric true-up, where we've got a very, very small PCIA charge for the 2016 vintages. We've got a negative PCIA for the 2021 and a more normal, I would say normal PCIA for 2022. And because we think that this is what we're going to look like, we really do think that we're going to end up with a positive, negative, positive situation. Or even if 2016 was a little bit negative, it's going to be close to zero. We're proposing that we group the rate making into, vintage categories versus a territory category to keep the customers that are having similar vintages and impacts from vintages together. And so we want to group the 2016 and 2021 customers together, and 2022, they're really sort of on their own, and have those customers have a rate that just applies to them and have a separate rate that applies to all the other customers, because those customers are more similar in the PCIA impact. 2022 customers are really kind of separate here. They've got a different, their own situation happening. Go to the next slide, and I'll walk you through what that kind of looks like in a rate calculation. So if we're doing a rate calculation for us internally, it looks a little bit like this, where we start off with the PG&E bundled generation rate, which is that top line there, that 15,683 cents. That is the generation rate from the November AET for the E1 rate schedule. So the very flat tier basic residential rate schedule, that's what's in the November 15th true up. So we take 95% of that and we get to that 14,899 cents as our baseline to start with, where we started, then we applied the appropriate PCIA and franchise fees to back out into what we would charge as put in for clean energy. So for the 2016, we would subtract that very small 2016 vintage PCIA minus the franchise fee surcharge, and we get a rate that is 14,684 cents per kilowatt hour, based off of rate making from the 2016 vintage. And then for the 2022 vintage, we get a lower rate. It's 403 cents per kilowatt hour, and that rate is lower because the PCIA is higher for 2022. But if you follow down on the, if you keep following me down here on the what the effective rate for the customer looks like, we factor in what's happening on the PG&E side of the bill now. So PG&E is going to be assessing the 2016 PCIA rate and franchise fee surcharge to those 2016 customers, and they're going to get that 14,899 cents per kilowatt hour. Look back up. That matches the 95% of the PG&E generation rate. That's a 5% discount for customers at the 2016 vintage. Now, if we take that rate that we made for the 2016 customers and we apply it to the 2021 customers, they're actually going to end up getting a little bit more than 5% discount. If you look here, because on PG&E side of the bill, there's going to be a credit for those 2021 customers. And so you've got a very small credit for PCIA. You've got the charge for the franchise fee surcharge. And so the effective rate for the 2021 vintage customers is a little bit less, ends up looking like an 8.5% discount. And then the 2022 customers, same process we did for 2016, and they are at a 5% discount. So we think that this is probably the most likely scenario of what we're going to end up with, where we're going to be doing rate making with a 5% discount for the San Mateo County batch of customers, a little bit, if we group in the 2021 Los Banos customers into that, they're going to end up getting a little bit higher discount. And then we're going to still make sure that the 2022 customers have at least a 5% discount. We couldn't apply the 2016 rate all the way across the board because that would mean that the 2022 customers would have a higher charge. They wouldn't have at least a 5% discount. And so we think that this is the best way to approach the rate making in 2023 when we're dealing with this anomaly of mixed vintages. I talked at you guys a lot. Nobody raised their hand. Maybe that means everybody understood what I said. But I'm happy to take questions. The last slide is just our recommendation and sort of restatement of the resolution for the board. So if folks have questions about that process that I walked through ahead, please don't be shy.
I don't see any hands up for questions. Think about it for a minute. Let me see if there's any public comment. If you have public comment, please click the reaction button at the bottom to raise your hand. I don't see any public comment either, Leslie.
Great. So then I'll ask then the board to approve our request here, directing the CEO to, authorizing the CEO to direct staff to calculate and implement the new PCE Eco Plus rates for customers effective February 1, 2023, to maintain a minimum net 5% discount and generation charges compared to PG&E rates that are going to be effective January 1.
Great.
Thanks, Leslie. This is Donna, and I'll go ahead and make the motion to authorize the CEO per your exact words to direct the staff to calculate and implement the new PCE Eco Plus rates for customers effective February 1st with the minimum net 5% discount. And just thank you very much for making a very complex mathematical calculation as easy as it is to understand. I know there's a lot of new people on this call today, and some of us have heard this 2 or 3 times. So that's why there's probably not a lot of comments, but the staff has really done excellent work on this. And given the vicissitudes in this over time, it's really remarkable how flexible you guys are and how easily you guys manipulate and work on the data. Thank you very much for doing that on behalf of our customers.
I'll second that, Chair.
Great, thanks, Marty.
Medina.
And we can do a roll call.
Okay, San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont, Brisbane, Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough, Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica, Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos, San Mateo, South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. The motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to mention, because I think I forgot to say it in the presentation, but we will report back out at the January board meeting, so everyone knows what the end result was when we actually know what the rates what rates we had to work with.
Thank you,
Great.
Leslie.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is approval of long-term resource adequacy agreement with PG&E.
All right, I'll go ahead and
Right,
take
and-
over the screen.
Yeah, so Jeff Wright from our Power Resources team will be making this presentation. Jeff just joined us in beginning of September, I believe, but he is an RA expert, so thank you. Take it away, Jeff.
All right, let me get this in the presentation mode. 1 second. Okay, so Jeff Wright, Power Resources Manager, here tonight presenting a long-term resource adequacy agreement with PG&E. I'm seeking board's approval on the resolution delegating authority to the CEO to execute a master power purchase and sale agreement, resource adequacy confirmation letter with PG&E and any necessary ancillary documents with a resource adequacy delivery term of 15 years starting on January 1st, 2024 in an amount not to exceed $10 million. So some background on resource adequacy, or RA. Under the CPUC's RA program, Peninsula is obligated as a load-serving entity to procure capacity so that capacity is available to the CAISO when needed. Peninsula utilizes its portfolio of power resources as well as bilateral capacity purchases to meet these RA obligations. These compliance obligations are set relative to Peninsula's coincident peak load forecast. So some background on this agreement that I'm presenting. Under the CPUC's decision 2205-015, Peninsula has the option to purchase system RA capacity from PG&E as a result of load migration of Los Banos into Peninsula Clean Energy's load territory. This capacity is a result of long-term system RA capacity procurement made by PG&E under CPUC's decision 1911-016. The option to enter this contract with PG&E expires on December 31st. So the contract structure. The product, as I mentioned, is a system RA product compliant with the CPUC and CAISO regulations. The volume is up to 5 megawatts, but it's based on a fixed percentage of a pool of PG&E contracted resources. The total amount of capacity within this pool may decrease over time due to planned outages of resources, delays in resource online dates, capacity reductions as deemed by the CAISO or CPUC, and then resources that eventually expire from this pool. The contract term is 15 years and starts on January 1st, 2024. The price is set at the final system RA price, the final system RA market price benchmark for each respective year within the contract term. So this is actually the CPUC's calculated weighted average market price each year based on collected RA transactions. So what are the agreement risks and benefits? The risk, I mentioned the volume may decrease over the contract term. The annual price will change based on the applicable CPUC weighted average market price, which is revised every single year. Both parties share this risk. So PG&E will share this on the selling end. We'll have this risk, and then we'll have the same risk on the buying end. There's potential that this may result in excess RA, depending on our future portfolio of resources. So some of the benefits are that PCE's percentage of this pool is fixed. So although the pool may shrink over time, our percentage of that pool is fixed. This provides certainty towards meeting long-term compliance obligations for resource adequacy. And the 5 megawatt volume is very small relative to our compliance obligations. It's actually less than 1%. If we are ever in an excess RA position, we can always sell our length to other load serving entities. So I guess I can take some questions if there's any before asking for recommendation to approve.
Okay. I don't see any questions, Jeff. So can I get a motion to approve the resolution that you see on the screen?
So moved.
Okay, thanks, Marty. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rod.
Through the chair, do you want to take public comment?
Yeah, I do. Is there any public comment on this? Thanks, Jeff. I don't see any public comment, so we can do a roll call.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont, Brisbane, Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough, Los Vanos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica, Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos, San Mateo, South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. And we have a quorum. I'm sorry. The motion passes. Thank you. Quorum thing has me nervous tonight.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm here to discuss the recent happenings in the NEM reform case before the Public Utilities Commission. This item is particularly timely because the Public Utilities Commission had their final voting meeting of the year this morning and this afternoon, as it were. As Jen noted earlier, they had about 6 hours of public comment before getting to their actual agenda. They ultimately did vote out this decision in a 5-0 vote, full in favor, without any last minute red lines, and we'll get a bit into the detail of some limited edits that they had to the decision, but we can move on to the next slide. So to start off with, I just wanted to provide a bit of historical context for this grand debate. Net energy metering has been in effect in California since 2014. When it was initially put into place, it's what we now commonly refer to as NEM 1.0. And it wasn't until the end of 2016 where the transition began into the NEM 2.0 rule set, which is the NEM rules that we're more or less accustomed to at this point in time, where customers that participate in self-generation with rooftop solar are compensated for any excess generation that they create through a mechanism called the net surplus compensation rate. And there's been some concerns around both NEM 1 and 2.0 in terms of how much they have been compensating customers for their excess generation. It's by design, NEM was never really intended for empowering customers to become power plants for their neighborhoods. It was really intended for customers to self-generate electricity to meet their own on-site needs. And so there's always been a bit of a rub about how much generation should be compensated at. That same case that created the reformed rules for the NEM 2.0 construct also held the door open for further review, because there was concerns about the potential for cost shifts and other regressive policy implications of the NEM design. What I mean by that is that the incentives or the compensation provided to customers for their excess generation has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the rates of the broader rate base and from those that are not able to participate in them. So there's been some equity concerns, and we'll get into that a little bit further on another slide. But the commission did keep the door open to contemplate further NEM reform, and that did lead to the start of a new NEM proceeding in August of 2020, where they started to consider the principles for how they should evaluate any potential reform that the 2.0 rule set. They then issued a decision in February of 2021 where they codified what those principles would be that they'd use to evaluate the potential need to reform the rules. And all that led to finally a proposed decision about this time last year, where the commission proposed rather sweeping reform to the way that net energy metering is evaluated, and the way in particular that customers that participate in this type of program are compensated for their excess solar generation. For a little more context, the assigned commissioner of that proceeding at that point in time was Commissioner Martha Guzman Aceves. She had a very strong focus during her time as a commissioner on equity issues, and she was very concerned about addressing the cost shifts that certainly existed in NEM 1.0 and persisted to a degree in NEM 2.0 rules as well. And so it was really, I think, largely motivated by trying to undo whatever subsidy there is in the way that NEM compensation and rate structures are defined. So her office, along with the assigned administrative law judge, issued a draft decision, a proposed decision on December 13th of 2021. That very same week, perhaps even concurrently, she also gave notice that she would be leaving the commission to take a job with the US EPA, as she was appointed by the Biden administration to work within the US EPA. Also around that time, but for differing reasons, the president of the Public Utilities Commission also gave notice saying that Mary Bale Batcher said that she would be ending her presidency a bit early at the end of the calendar year. So the commission had this proposed decision, came out on the 13th, which was not quite quick enough for them to act on in the final meeting of the year. So it wasn't until after the holidays, come mid-January, that they were able to even consider this item at a meeting. And at that point, they had 2 vacancies out of their 5 commissioners. So it was a bit of a mess. And there was tremendous public outcry right from the get-go. And I'm sure you are all aware of that. And I'm sure you all bore witness to a lot of that. And the commission did something that I candidly have never seen them do. Rather than just postpone the vote by a meeting or two, make some edits and continue to postpone the vote until they're really ready to act on it, they announced that they were simply going to hold the matter indefinitely in February of this year. And over the summer, they did issue a ruling seeking some limited comments on a limited subset of issues to further refine the positioning in the case. But beyond that comment period, the proceeding itself was more or less dormant, and everyone was waiting with great anticipation for when the commission would come out with a revised proposed decision. That did come out in November. They noticed it right before Veterans Day, or circulated it right before Veterans Day, which was effectively the last working day that they could notice the item and still have the proper 30-day advance notice for the meeting that they held today on the 15th. So it was a bit of a scramble. We had the Veterans Day off, as well as the Thanksgiving weekend also eating into working hours to evaluate this decision, we and everyone else. But this was clearly an effort to get this matter resolved, but to wait on resolving this matter till after the November elections had run their course. And while still trying to get it wrapped up within the calendar year so they could move on. And that's effectively what they did today. There, as I noted earlier, they had 6 hours of public comment. I don't know if that's a record for them, but that's certainly up there with some of the longest meetings I'm aware of that they've had. The commission ultimately voted 5-0 in favor of the revised proposed decision. There were some limited red line edits that were released a day before, but by and large, what they brought out right before Veterans Day in November and what they adopted today were pretty much the same decision. There was a little bit about virtual net energy metering and such that the commission decided to hold off on coming to a conclusion on, and they're keeping the case open to further explore how to refine NEM for virtual net energy metering. We can move on to the next slide. So as I've already spoken to some extent, there's been a great deal of political tension within this case and leading up to this case. There's clearly the interests of the solar industry and especially the distributed solar industry in terms of the jobs that they create, in terms of the continued steady demand for the services and the products that they provide through the NEM structure and the compensation structures that NEM provides, versus this concern over there being a subsidy between those that can participate and those that cannot participate. And generally speaking, there's a much, much higher participation rate with those ratepayers that have decent incomes, are able to own their own homes, and are of more privileged demographic, let's say. And so it's been very much viewed as a regressive policy structure that the state has relied on for far too long to spur adoption of new technologies. And there's been a lot of pressure from the environmental justice groups, the low-income advocates and such, to really pare back how this compensation tariff structure was designed. There's also been tensions between the camps that argue for more and more distributed generation as a way to address our climate objectives and decarbonizing our grid, versus approaching things through the utility scale. And there's certainly been a number of op-eds that have argued about how costly it is to put solar on individual homes and rooftops. It really should all be done over either parking lots or at utility scale out in the desert to leverage economies of scale. Those tensions played out very much through this case and through different parties' positions. And this isn't really, the third bullet here isn't really a point of tension between different parties in perspective, but there's kind of a forced evolution that the commission is trying to create with this revision in their rate structures, where NEM 1 and 2 really just created a structure to encourage people to put solar on their roofs and to self-generate power, without a lot of sensitivity to when that solar is being generated and when, if any, excess generation is created, when it goes back to the grid. And that has in part led to what's commonly referred to in the industry as the duck graph, where we have this belly of the duck in the middle of the day where there's a huge amount of renewable generation being generated with relatively low demand. And then the neck of the duck and the head of the duck occur in the late afternoon, early evening, where the sun sets, the solar generation tapers off, everyone gets home, turns on all their appliances, and there's a spike in demand. And so there's been a long-standing understanding that what we need to do here is either lower demand or shift some of that generation. And a key attribute to that is adding storage. So the commission's been very keen on refining them to create a strong incentive for those with rooftop solar to include storage in their installations. And so that's something that's very much playing out with the decision that they've adopted here and a lot of the structure of the conversation that's taken place in this case. And there still continues to be tensions between individual actions to adopt solar versus community scale solutions for solar adoption as well. And California's really not as clean and green and innovative as we are. Community scale solar has lagged behind, largely I think due to regulatory impediments. But there's still been pressures by advocacy groups trying to advance other ways of increasing access to renewables, especially to those that are either tenants or in a multi-unit setting where they, even if they own their condominium, let's say, they don't have control over what goes on the roof, at least not all on their own. And so there are further models that are more supportive to broadening the access to solar that have been trying to argue for their perspectives as well in this case. So it's been very, very much a politically charged proceeding at the commission, probably one of the most ones they've had in a long time. Next slide. And so the main aspects of reform that are taking place with this new decision, so I have a little comparison here between what they brought out this time last year and what they adopted just today. And a lot of the outcry that you may have all heard last December into January and February was concerns from the solar industries, and it was largely focused around this grid participation charge, which was just a flat $1 per kilowatt monthly charge. That kilowatt value is a measure of how large the solar array at the property is. So let's say a 5 kilowatt residential array would have a $40 per month charge, or a 10 kilowatt array would have an $80 per month charge. Many parties pushed back on the concept of this grid charge, saying that it was unfairly penalizing those that adopt NEM, and that it was something that was discriminatory because it was only being applied to a subset of ratepayers rather than a rate base wide offering like you'd see with a standard utility rate structure. There was also a push to force NEM 1 and 2 customers that are already participating in those rules that typically have a 20-year guarantee of being compensated under the either NEM 1 or NEM 2 compensation rates, push that to be a 15-year period with the adoption of the decision. And then a big part of the focus of this case was how to compensate excess generation, as I spoke to earlier. The 2.0 rule set uses a calculation called the net surplus compensation rate. Does not really take into account the hours of the day when that generation is being put back into the grid. And so there was a lot of push to create a compensation rate price signal that was sensitive to time of day and time of year potentially. And there were a wide range of proposals as simple as just pay them at the wholesale rate versus another concept here, which is the avoided cost calculator, which takes more than the wholesale rate and it appreciates what costs may be being avoided by this additional supply of electricity being voluntarily provided to the grid. So potentially, let's say, an additional power plant doesn't need to be built, and the transmission for that additional power plant doesn't need to be invested in and such. It's trying to figure out the calculation of just how much incremental share of that power plant each, say, kilowatt hour of rooftop solar might be helping to contribute to avoid. It is time of day sensitive, and it has some seasonal weightings to it, but it is a substantial step down from that surplus compensation in terms of just the $1 per kilowatt hour that's being compensated. And so that's continued to be an area of concern, especially with the solar community, that this would be too much of a rate shock for NEM customers, and they would erode too much of the proposition to compel people to install rooftop solar on their roofs. And then there's the transition period where they proposed on 120 days from the final decision. Customers that are able to get their interconnection approved for their solar installations would still be able to participate under the NEM 2.0 compensation structure for the duration of their agreement. I ran through the left column. The right column is what ultimately landed in the decision, and this was based on the proposed, but these factors did not change in the final revisions to the decision. So they did away with the grid charge. They did away with the early migration of existing NEM customers onto this new compensation structure. They introduced an adder to the avoided cost calculator that declines over 4 years as a way to kind of ease this transition between the net surplus compensation world that NEM customers are presently accustomed to and this new avoided cost calculator compensation structure going forward. And they stuck to that 120-day period. And we go to the next slide. This is my last slide. These were some of the points that we and other CCAs as a joint venture advocated around in terms of trying to refine that proposed decision, this final proposed decision. We pushed for that 120-day period to be expanded to 180 days. The proposed decision stated that 120 days occur before the utilities have their billing systems in order, which frankly seemed a bit backwards in our opinion. So we pushed for that to be switched. So they get their billing in order, then they migrate customers into this new rule set. Neither of these recommendations the commission acted on. They stuck to the 120-day period. They stuck to the transition period happening before the billing system is overhauled. And what they're doing for customers that are NEM 3.0 before the billing systems are ready is they will be billed at NEM 2.0 rates until the billing systems are ready to bill them under the proper NEM 3.0 rate structure. We did argue for the avoided cost calculator plus construct to decrease in its incentive level based on installed capacity rather than just the passage of time. There's worry that if there's not a lot of time that, or not a lot of adoption in this first year or two, that a lot of that transitionary benefit will just have gone unutilized. Unfortunately, the commission did not adopt that recommendation either. They did stick to no grid participation charge. They did stick to no accelerated transition for NEM customers. So all in all, I think relative to a year ago, where they landed this morning, today was certainly a better outcome. But it's certainly going to create some significant changes within the solar adoption rate, and we'll see in real time how people really respond to this. But I think the commission claims in this new NEM 3.0 world, a typical rooftop solar installation will have its costs repaid in 9 years' time. And they claim that with the addition of storage, the system can recoup costs at a quicker pace because the household would be able to shift their period where they return energy to the grid to the highest value hours of the grid. We'll see how that plays out, comparing their academic analysis to real world, and we'll see what this means in terms of the actual slowing of the adoption of rooftop solar, which hopefully is minimal to achieve our climate objectives. But we will certainly be watching this closely in terms of real world impacts. A couple things I want to point out to the board here is that this avoided cost calculator plus compensation rate applies to the utilities and how they compensate for excess generation. CCAs can compensate their NEM customers for excess generation at whatever rate we feel is appropriate in accordance with our board's oversight. So we don't necessarily have to adopt this ACC plus structure. I think there is merits to exploring a compensation rate that's sensitive to time of day to encourage people to adopt storage. So we will have to explore that internally in terms of how close to this compensation rate do we want to move relative to what we're presently doing. And we will certainly need to be exploring the ways to aid our customers in adopting storage as well as the rooftop solar. So that's the run of my presentation. I'm wondering if there are any questions or any comments.
Yeah, questions. I've got a couple questions, Jeremy. My first question, and I'll ask them both. My first question deals with export compensation, and that looks, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the biggest difference between M3 and M2 is this export compensation. And
That's, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
and my question about that is, does export compensation only address the generation from rooftop solar that is exported to the grid in excess of what that customer uses from the grid? And is that over a year's time period?
Yeah, so the present NEM structure does an annual truing up of how much energy the customer has consumed versus from the grid versus supplied to the grid, and trues up that net calculation. I believe they're sticking to an annualized netting process for NEM 3.0, but it will be sensitive to the hours of the day in which the energy is being pulled from the grid or supplied back to the grid. And the way that the avoided cost calculator is sensitive to the varying values of electricity throughout the hours of the day. That ACC plus compensation is only for the power that's put back into the grid by these customers. And there is some, there are kind of different ways that one can deploy a solar system. You can prioritize it to really offset as much of your own demand throughout the day as possible with and without storage. Or you can, especially with storage, prioritize it to push back as much power as you possibly can during the high value hours of the day. And so that's what they're trying to grapple with, is that some people may be trying to game this out to sell as much, be a seller in a way, and sell as much power to the grid at high value hours of the day, rather than offset their on-site use. I don't know if that quite answered your question, Rick.
Yeah, so I understand that issue, that if somebody is generating power and they have storage, they can consume that power from the grid during the peak hours, which is generally when they're generating power, during the off-peak hours of the daytime when they're generating power, and then sell it back during peak hours when they're not generating, and they could game the system that way. But if at the end of the year they have used more energy than they've exported, then would they not have any export compensation, or would they still have been compensated for when they sell that power back, even if a net they used more power than they've generated?
So part of the netting process, and I know Leslie can speak to this well as well, but in the annualized netting, as I think the board's well aware, there are quite a few non-bypassable charges customers have to pay, and there's an evaluation of, based on how much power you've pulled from the grid, that informs how much of these non-bypassable charges have to be paid. And so that there is a decent bill that comes due at the end of the year for those accrued non-bypassable charges that then gets offset by your self-generation and the credit, the valuation of that export compensation. So often, if you're not exporting by a high amount, a lot of what you've provided back to the grid throughout the year really just offsets that lingering bill for the non-bypassable charges. So it's, you end up still having to pay some. It really varies from customer to customer and the size of the array and the level of their use.
Okay, thank you. Donna.
Thank you. I just want to thank Jeremy and Mark for their help on this. We did, the city of Burlingame did send in a letter to the governor's office focused on just the potential impacts it would have to more roof-based solar installations in our community. And so in order to follow up on this, where a lot of our constituents were advocating, Jeremy, based on the ruling today. Is there a link to that ruling or some sort of something I can share with my staff so that we can report back out to the city so they and the constituents know where what happened at the meeting, like a follow-up?
Absolutely. We have the redlined document both with and without the red line that we released just a day ago. The commission typically publishes their final decision a day or so afterwards. So I expect tomorrow we will have the final official document that we can share with the board and you can share with your constituents.
I think that would be really helpful for those of us who wrote letters. It would be wonderful to be able to, you know, close the circle on it and let people know what the outcome was. Thank you.
John and then Dave.
Jeremy, is there any change in the size of an individual customer's rooftop array that's allowed?
That is a great question, and they are allowing in this new decision for customers to oversize their arrays by up to 50%. There is some additional changes to the language in the decision relating to this that are really kind of about the technicalities of how one does that. If you have a full year of annual use from the year prior, you can use that to determine what the 50% threshold ought to be. If not, I think they're depending predominantly on the attestation from the customer that they anticipate using more energy in the future. And that is a critical detail, especially for our agency and our interests, as we are encouraging customers to electrify their homes and to move away from their gas appliances. And so that is a way to allow for customers, if they want to get their solar in place first, to get it in place at a large enough scale to allow for them to grow their local load as they adopt electric appliances and or electric vehicles as well.
Thank you.
Dave.
Jeremy, you mentioned that, you know, PCE is now going to go back and reconsider its own NEM pricing policies. And if I recall, you know, our existing NEM, you know, pricing was more favorable for the end user than what was offered by PG&E. And I think we did that because we wanted to encourage rooftop solar. And do we have any indications that that was successful in attracting more people to install solar? Because I imagine that's going to be a big consideration for us as we look at this a second time.
Yeah, I would have to defer, I think, to our programs team for an assessment of the relative adoption rate of rooftop solar in our service area versus, say, neighboring communities that may not have that premium.
Sure.
I know the way that we've structured our premium is in line with how other CCAs have approached this issue as well. So to the point about perhaps adapting our premium to be time-based, that's something we can likely work with our peers on as well to come to a common structure. But I do think it has created a stronger signal for encouraging members of our community to adopt rooftop solar relative to what PG&E has provided.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Let me just see if there's any public comment on this. I don't see any questions or public comment, so thank you, Jeremy. And Jan has a couple items that she wanted to bring up.
Okay, thank you. What we're showing here that we weren't able to show earlier is the photo of the founding board members for Peninsula Clean Energy. So some of you will see your pictures here. Everyone looks just the same now as they did 6 years ago. So this is a fun photo, and we will be, Nellie's going to be sending this to those founding board members who are in the photo, who have recently retired. So it's a nice memory back in the day. The other thing I wanted to report out on is that we are planning social media posts regarding the spike in high natural gas prices. And those social media posts will go out starting tomorrow and early next week to our Twitter and Facebook followers. And that's it, that's what I wanted to add. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the last item on the agenda is board member reports. Dave.
Yes,
Betsy,
I had a
then-
comment to make, and I meant to make this comment after the CEO report, but I wanted to duly note that Justin Pine has joined PCE. But Mr. Justin is not related to me, but nonetheless, I'm very happy to have another Pine in the fold.
Thanks, Dave. I mean, we haven't compared family lines, but also happy to see another Pine here. Don't see that often.
No, you don't. Straight name.
Okay, Betsy.
Thank you. I was just going to ask Jan if we could possibly get the Twitter gas price information sent by email to board members. If that's easy, just to so that we can pass it along more easily to staff and residents who might not be using Twitter these days.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Jan, did you hear that? You're muted.
Yeah, KJ is on the line. KJ, if you're able to respond to that.
Sure. What we can do is provide Nellie the types of posts that we'll be putting out on Twitter and Facebook, and then she can forward to the board.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, or we could put it in our newsletter that goes out tomorrow to all of you as well. How about that? Okay.
That's
It
good.
depends on the timing, Jan.
Okay, if it's ready, yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more comments, so have a great holiday, everyone. We will see you in January. Thank you for all your time.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Right.